Hello, and welcome to the Choralosophy Podcast. I'm Chris Muntz. This is episode 45. It's time to transfer the deed to our singers with Dr. Betsy Cook Weber. Dr. Weber, in my mind, is one of the legends of the choral profession due to the contribution of her body of work over many years and at all levels of teaching, which I think is amazing. I find the combination of her high-level music making, along with her experience in classrooms with young kids and everything in between, all the way up to 80-year-old singers, just to be a fascinating model to which we could all aspire. I can't think of a better person to guide us through our thinking about concepts related to ownership and professionalism within our ensembles. When we all work with singers from such a wide range in our daily lives, could we establish a definition or some kind of set of principles that's guiding and uniting in how we think of this as a profession? Is it possible for us to, as conductors, to let go of some of the control? What would that look like? Could some of our choirs actually improve by us getting out of the way? How would our egos, our fragile conductor egos, handle that? In this refreshing episode, Dr. Weber and I tackle these and many more questions. So stick around. Before we get there, exciting news. The convention in Atlanta, Choralosophy Con 2021, is officially April 9 through 11 in Atlanta at the Four Points Marriott by the airport there in Atlanta. I've already got my hotel room reserved. We've got Ryan Main coming to give sessions. We've got Jacqueline Johnson is going to do choral yoga and mindfulness. We've got session leaders being added all the time. This is going to be a convention unlike anything you've experienced before. It is in person. We will be recording podcasts while we're there. We are going to be getting rid of the old concept or the tried concept of a convention where you walk in and you simply pick up a handout and you sit down and shut up while the smart person talks. This is not going to be that kind of a convention. We're going to have session leaders, but the idea will be that we all come in knowing we're going to have a conversation about a thing. And then we're all going to talk about that thing. And we're going to be recording some of it. We're going to be broadcasting some of it, but we're also going to just be sitting down and talking, which is kind of the whole point of this model. We can't do the big conventions in person right now because of the size and because of the all kinds of COVID uncertainties. This convention is going to be capped at 60 people. So we're going to be signing up. You can sign up now. That is... You can sign up now by clicking over onto Facebook on the Choralosophy Con 2021 group, but there is also now a site on my website, and that's choralosophy.com/choralosophy-con. Really quite easy to get there, and it will also be in the show notes of this episode. Okay, I would be remiss to not thank the producers from the Patreon page for this show. This show has a producer level on its Patreon. You can get in the door over there and get those once a month behind the scenes private podcast feed episodes, just as well as some materials that I might have created for some of the episodes in the past, some behind the scenes information on the show as well, plus kind of an off social media way to chat about some of the things that go on the show. It's a great thing over there. Plus, there is a producer level. The show is produced on patreon.com/choralosophy by Ulrika Igrain Munoz Alarcon, Michael Herron, David Kowalczyk, James Mock, Kyle Peterson, Ryan Main, and Steve and Kathy Kakachik. A brief note, my mother-in-law is Kathy Kakachik. She recently passed away. We miss you, Kathy. Thank you so much for your continued support, and you'll never stop being a part of this show. I also want to give a quick shout out to the Resonant Singers Masks. You might have seen the Facebook page for this podcast sharing like crazy all the groups out there that have figured out risk reduction ways to return to singing. And we all owe a debt of gratitude, of course, to this innovative and really high quality product, which is the Resonant Singers Mask from mymusicfolders.com. If your choirs are just now starting to come back in person, or you just are frustrated with the constant, okay, sing an ah vowel, and the mask falls off, I encourage you to reach out at the website, mymusicfolders.com, find the Resonant Singers Mask, and then order them for your choirs. What I did for my choirs is I used money that we would have otherwise spent on tuxes and dresses inventory for the year, and we spent it on the masks, and we asked the students to rent them from us. to rent them from us for $10 for the year, because they're not a cheap mask. They're high quality, and so they cost around $30 with the discount code. So we got a batch of those, and the kids are just subsidizing it. So they'll use it for the year, and I told them we'll collect them at the end of the year from you and use them the next time a pandemic hits. We will be stocked. So that's what we are doing at the school. Of course, you might have lots of funding solutions for you, but highly recommend those masks. And of course, we can't forget to talk about the beginning of a school year. School year is ramping up. You're trying to find educational solutions for your kids. Sight Reading Factory is a must. Get yourself and your students signed up for Sight Reading Factory and start allowing that routine and that daily practice to start happening. It takes a little while at the beginning to rip off the Band-Aid and get some of those shy kids to do it. But once they start, it's amazing how much progress they make, whether you're in class or sending them assignments at home. Okay, you're going to love this chat. Without any further ado, I'm going to take you straight over to Betsy Cook Weber. All right, well, I'm here with Dr. Betsy Cook Weber of the University of Houston, and I am super excited to pick her brain about the concept of building within our choirs a sense of professionalism, ownership, giving our choirs the tools to really contribute as members of the ensemble. So thank you for coming on, and thanks for being part of the show.
Oh, my pleasure.
We'll start out by, why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are? So give us the quick version of just kind of where your career started, what got you interested in being a choir director, and then all the way to now.
Okay. Well, I'm currently director of choral studies at the University of Houston, and I'm also chorus master, director of the Houston Symphony Chorus. My career began with 4 years of teaching elementary music, 3 years of middle school choir, and 6 years of high school choral directing. So I have done everything from kindergarten through 80-year-olds. I decided when I was 10 that I wanted to be a music teacher, just like Mrs. Eccles, who was my elementary music teacher, and I never changed my mind.
Uh-huh.
So this is my 46th year of teaching, and I enjoy it as much now as I ever have.
That's great. I wonder how many of us that do this job had some formative music teacher that just kind of made it click in our brain that, hey, I could do that too.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think almost all of us do this because somebody else inspired us.
Yeah, absolutely. One of those first ones for me was my mother. Was a choir director and elementary school music teacher, and taught me to read music out of the hymnal. That was where I learned.
Right.
Just with a little finger point along, and eventually I figured it out. That's great. Well, so tell us a little bit before we dive too far into the topic at hand. In your current position, what does that look like for you in terms of, like, what are the things you're in charge of there at University of Houston?
Well, of course, right now, because of COVID, it's all extremely different.
Right.
But at University of Houston, we have 3 faculty members on faculty. And so I oversee all the balls in the air. It's wonderful to work with really capable and talented people because they do their own thing. But, there's some administrative work that needs doing. And there's, trying to pull together a philosophy and an energy and a long-term and a short-term plan. I conduct the top ensemble. I teach graduate students. My colleague, Dr. Jeb Mueller, also, we share students. So our graduate students study with me one semester, and then they go to Jeb another semester. So we share those students, and it's a busy time usually, but not so busy right now.
Oh yeah, of course. I find in my particular world, it feels there's less to do, yet I still somehow feel busier.
Yes.
Simply,
Well,
yeah, you know what I mean? It's like there was less total tasks because we can't rehearse quite as much, we can't sing or do quite as many performances and all these things, but every little thing takes longer because you've got to figure out new ways to do it.
yes.
New procedures, all. Yeah, I know. I feel you. So what is it that got you really passionate about this concept of having the conductor be the kind of the philosophical center, but not necessarily the one who's in charge of every detail. This idea that your singers should have a sense of ownership within the ensemble. Where did that come from for you?
Right. Well, first of all, I think most of us choir directors have kind of a problem with control. We really like to be in control.
Mhm.
And it may be one of the things that attracted us to the profession. But in 2007, the U of H Concert Chorale was invited to sing at National ACDA. And, I was working as hard as any human being has ever worked. It occurred to me that the singers weren't working as hard as I was. And more importantly, I didn't think they sounded very good.
Mhm.
And so around January, end of January, I called my section leaders in and said, I am concerned it doesn't sound very good. And what I had hoped would happen, they would say, oh no, it's fine. But instead they all said, you're right. It's terrible. And my alto section leader at the time, Saini Mila, who is the world's best middle school choral director now at this point, said, Dr. Weber, just let me at the altos. Let me work with them and I can fix that. And all the section leaders said the same thing. And, to their credit, they were right. They fixed it. To my great embarrassment, I should have been letting them do that all along. And as soon as I let those students, and these were undergrad students, not grad students, as soon as I let those undergrad students lead each other, the whole group came along.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty good performance. Actually, it was a really good performance. And so I thought a lot about that after that and realized that the top-down approach that, we copy orchestral maestros, I think, in some ways, and that should not be our model. The energy and the creativity needs to come from the bottom up to us, and then we need to be the one that helps make it happen.
Mhm.
So I worked really hard to make that our tradition since 2007, and it really has worked. So the students, I try to let them do everything.
That's awesome. I completely agree. I share that philosophy too, but like you, it took me a little while to get there because I had to see it for myself, if that makes sense. Because no, and I think you might be hinting at this, that idea wasn't modeled for you at some point. You were taught to be in control
Right.
at some point along the way, and as was I. And I started to have to just learn the hard way. And so I'm wondering, what interests me about your story in 2007 is, what do you think it was about the way you had been doing it before that prevented you from giving that student leadership right away? Like, what was it about it, your upbringing and your philosophy, that led into that?
Yeah, I've thought about it a lot. I mean, first of all, I think it's the models that we grew up with, kind of stern, strict, honestly, sometimes kind of mean choir directors.
Hmm.
I think part of it's my personality. I do like to be in control, which is not all bad, but has some bad to it. Um, and there's something about asking for help. When you ask for help, it feels as though you're shirking. It
Hmm.
uh, I think to most of us, we don't want to ask for help. It's as though, I mean, it may be that people will think we don't know what we're doing if we ask for help. It may be that they think that we're shoving our workload off on others when we ask for help. So it took me a lot of time, and it still does, to just ask for help. And the interesting thing is, do you remember when you were in elementary school and you got to be the person who erased the whiteboard or the blackboard,
Oh
and
yeah.
how thrilling that was? Or you got to be the line leader to go to cafeteria? People want to help.
Hmm.
They want to feel as though they own the ensemble.
Right.
And and so that led me to reading about ownership. The business world has done a ton of research in this because they can make more money if they can uh, convince their employees to become owners um, of a corporation. So they've done tons of research on it. And we in the choir world, I think we benefit from that same research if we just read it and think about it thoughtfully.
Yeah, that's really good. I like the way you phrase that, and I think one of the things that, and correct, see if you agree with this, and that part of that model that we all grew up with, or at least people of a certain generation, I guess, in the choral music world, I agree with your assessment that there's a little bit of a copycatting of the orchestral idea of what it is to be a conductor. Um, there is a little bit probably for us in the choir world of um, I don't know how to say this in a subtle way, I guess, but that's not really my thing anyway. But it's a inferiority complex that we have towards orchestral conductors. We see ourselves as not quite as fancy as them, and so as in our way of emulate, we can show that we are just as hard nosed, and we're just as precision oriented, and we're just as much of a musician as they are. I think that's part of the psychosis. And then one of the other things that strikes me about it too is that in the generation I was raised, the idea was that the conductor needs to be the font of all musical ideas that flow into the choir, and the choir is simply an instrument that we play with our hands.
Right.
Does that like seem familiar to you?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, and so what I think for me, one of the transitional moments was when I was, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and I started really buying into this idea, was that I started to ask myself, if the choir sounds great when we go on stage, do I really care if every idea that came into that performance was mine, or do I care if the choir sounds great? Because those can be mutually exclusive. So yeah, and so do you. So that was a little bit of a rant, but what I'm wondering is, when you involve your students now, when you engage your students now in this kind of leadership ownership role, what types of musical decisions do you allow them to contribute, and that might even survive into a performance?
Well, I issue pretty heavily edited scores
Mhm.
before the first rehearsal. We don't ever start a rehearsal without a fully marked score, and the score markings come from me.
Okay.
So a lot of the that's just because it's efficient, and I'm
Hmm.
trying to teach them, the professionalism of reading and copying the markings and doing all that. So a lot of the editing, of course, is our artistic decisions that one makes. But within that, I will accidentally omit things, or I'll change my mind about something. And I mean, I can think of about 5 times yesterday. We are finally singing in groups of 16 with masks and distanced. It's so thrilling. And I can think of at least half a dozen times when I threw out to the singers, what vowel do you want here? Do you want tall I? Do we want a schwa? Um, I put an eighth rest there, but what do you all think? Do you think maybe we should carry instead? And so there's a lot of that. And we talk about tempo a lot as a group. Um, so um, we also do tons of sectional work. And I encourage the sections when they go out to consider other musical ideas and to come back and say, as a group, we just preferred to do it this way. So I try to toss the ball in their court as much as possible. They also do a lot of repertoire hunting for us.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. In
Yeah.
fact, this afternoon we had a session where everybody had to submit 5 um, scores or recordings, and we listened to them to pick out music for the first concert in the spring.
Yeah, that's really great. I think when singers get a chance to not only select or suggest a piece every once in a while. I know you're at the university level, I'm at the high school level, but even at the high school level, by allowing them to know that if they become big enough choral lit nerds and they suggest something to me that I haven't heard before, we might actually sing it, because I'm respecting that they're going out listening and devouring this art form that I'm trying to expose them to. So that's a really cool thing. So you've got the scores coming out to them marked, which is that makes total sense. I totally get that. But I would say that even within that framework, like you said, there is a ton of room for artistic decisions to happen. One of the things I like to do is in a rehearsal, we might be singing it the way I'd ask them to mark it. But what I notice is that the singers kind of instinctually keep doing something else.
Yes.
At which point I will say, okay, so I asked you to mark this, but you keep doing this. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about which one is better. And once they figure out that the answer sometimes might be that your way was better. And there might have been a reason that you were instinctually singing it that way. Maybe it felt more natural in the voice. Maybe it felt like more of a natural phrase, and I was just getting in the way. Now, oftentimes I win, but as long as they know that sometimes they'll win, then they do feel like they're part of that team,
Right.
which is really important. So, what are some other thoughts that you might have about how we got to this point as a profession where we're passing the baton to our singers to make more and more decisions, to hold more and more ownership in the rehearsal was so hard? What are some of our pitfalls? What do we do wrong that leads us to this?
Well, we choose repertoire that's too hard.
Mm,
You can't have ownership over a product when you don't have the skills to have ownership. So to my rehearsal technique students, I talk to them about if we were teaching reading, language reading, we would never say, okay, this word is incompetence. Okay, say incompetence. Okay, now this word is studious. We would never teach them to read by connecting a whole bunch of words that were way over their heads. And
uh-huh.
yet we throw repertoire at our singers all the time is beyond their own skills to learn independently. That is, I think, more typical than not, is that we throw out a piece of music to our singers that they absolutely do not have the skills to teach themselves.
Right. And I
So,
like that you added the clarifier, the qualifier independently, because what it does is it forces them to be dependent on us.
and I think there's something of that we kind of like. We kind
Yep.
of want our students to need us,
Hmm.
but instead we need to teach them so well that they don't need us at all. I mean, honestly, at the University of Houston at this point, if I disappeared, the music would continue beautifully. And I'm not talking about having graduate students step in to lead the band. I'm talking about the kids could do that. But and in terms of repertoire selection, at some point we all decided that difficult music is better music.
Yeah.
And that's crazy.
Yeah.
We should be doing unison music. Let them teach themselves the musics. And we need to do less difficult music and we need to do more of it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the things that happens too, and this is, I'll be the one who kind of interjects what I think is going on in the choir director's ego. So I think that difficult music for many of us is a reflection of the skill with which we taught our choirs to sing. It's almost like in some of the Olympic sports when you get more points for trying the harder jump
Yes,
or whatever. And
yes.
so we get there a little bit of sense of keeping score in our own mind. And I don't even say it's like a competition with other directors, although there probably is that too. But it's just that sense of like, okay, so how do I know my choir's good? Well, it's whether or not they can sing Leonardo Dreams of His Flying Machine or whatever. And so there is that little bit of it too. And I think so. I think that's a really good concept. The other thing that I think is interesting too is that oftentimes our rehearsals are continuing and still being dependent on notes being taught in the rehearsal, keyboard being plunked out at them in the rehearsal, to the point where even the note learning in the rehearsal becomes more of a right answer, wrong answer equation than any kind of artistic making process that's going on. Do you see that note plunking problem too?
Totally. That's another thing I think we need to stop. We need to stop using piano in
Uh-huh.
rehearsals. I'm a pianist. Super comfortable at the piano. And of course, I have a fine accompanist at the university, but we never use piano until it's time to put an accompaniment together. We learn everything unaccompanied. And of course, I know a lot of people will say, well, that's because you're at the college level, you can do that. But if I were to return to K through 12, of course, I used piano every day back when I taught that. But at this point now, I would go back and we would not touch the piano.
Yep. At the high school level, we don't touch the piano at all.
Good.
I play a pitch on a pitch pipe app, and that's our tonic, and we rehearse a cappella.
Yep.
In fact, this is crazy. So this will be a funny little aside. On this show, I have done episodes so controversial about race and social justice and whether or not we should be singing during COVID and all kinds of things that should be super controversial. But the most guff I ever got after rehearsal or after an episode was doing an episode where I told people in over 45 minutes why they should never play notes for their kids. I got more angry emails from that episode than I did any of the other ones that I did, which if that tells you something right there. That we are attached to that, because I think what happens is a lot of times directors don't feel the confidence in themselves to lead an a cappella rehearsal. Is that something you work with your students and graduate students on, that concept?
Yes, they have to not use piano. Which, if they're a singer, they're just fine with that. If they're a pianist, of course, they're uncomfortable with that. But it just gets back to so do easier music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and eventually your ear as the conductor will also get better over time, and you will be able to lead an a cappella rehearsal with harder music. But you've got to build that skill.
Yeah, and when you're running a rehearsal with a piano, and you have to wait for the pianist to play, something so the tenors could sing, and then you wait, and then the pianist plays it for the altos. It's just stultifying. And it teaches all those singers to sit and drink, make out their grocery list while the tenors are having their part plunked out. It absolutely negates the concept of being a proactive, independent, sticking with the task throughout the whole rehearsal. I mean, it just negates all of that as soon as you bring a pianist in to do it for them.
Yeah, I totally agree. So this is our routine. This is what we do, and this is at the high school level. Like I said, we play a tonic and we just rehearse a cappella. But when wrong notes happen, and let's say it's the tenor section, often it is, but the tenor section that is not quite getting the entrance pitch correctly every time we get to that little section, whatever it is. It's rather than playing the note. I mean, my kids don't even ask to have the note played because they know it's not going to happen, so they don't ask. That faded out years ago. And so instead, it's me asking a question. It's this ownership idea. Let's say you're supposed to sing a D flat at measure 32, and they're not. So I say, tenors, what does your music say at measure 32? Oh, it's D flat. It's a do. Okay, so what are you singing? T? Yes, now sing do. So it becomes they have to answer their own question. And oftentimes if they're in the habit of being asked enough, they'll also learn to recognize immediately, here's the note I should have been singing, here's the one I actually sang, and then it becomes an easy fix. And so
Yep.
we don't even have to play the note. They don't have to ask for it to be played. Doesn't mean that they get it perfectly every time. It just means that they're able to process that. So I agree with you. That skill does have to get developed. It takes time. So what about things like if we're gonna, let's say a director's listening to us have this conversation and they're thinking, well, I want to have more ownership and leadership in my choir too. But let's say they also happen to be the type who has been, through no fault of their own, just the way they were raised as a teacher director, a control freak, and they've never given up any of these decisions or these types of things to their students before. How would you recommend that they proceed tomorrow? What are some quick ways to change the culture?
Well, I think there are peripheral tasks, and then there are core tasks. And hand off the peripheral tasks tomorrow. And that includes taking attendance, passing out music, straightening the chairs, working in the choral library. Hand off all that stuff so that it becomes a routine of the singers. And kids love to do that. And of course, sometimes, there was one school where I taught where it was not allowed for students to take attendance. Okay, well, that's fine. But there are all that just kind of junk that we do. Hand that off to your singers. And that's easy to do. And you can do that tomorrow. But then if you really want ownership, then you have to be willing to hand off some of the core tasks. And so core tasks are the actual making music. And so let students begin leading the vocalises, the stretches. And that's when it starts taking you more time than if you just do it yourself, because you really have to teach them how to do it.
Yeah.
You have to teach them how to stand in front of a group and be serious and be a leader and not laugh and be silly. And so that's a real teaching moment. Mm-hmm. And then let them lead some sectionals, and not just your section leaders, but in concert chorale, every singer at some point or another, and this is true in symphony chorus too, when we're doing small preparations, every singer at some point or another, whether they're a landscaper or a U.S. postman, they have to lead a sectional at some point.
That's cool.
And it's astonishing what a good job they do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And over time, you just try to keep handing off more and more of the core tasks as well as peripheral tasks.
So tell me, let's dive into sectionals a little bit more, because that's a passion of mine too, student-led sectionals. So you said not only section leaders, so that means you do have section leaders, yes, but you still share the duty across the choir. So what is the role then of a section leader? How would you describe what their job is for you and your choir?
Well, the section leaders are acknowledged to be, the strongest singers in a section, and I select them. That they are not elected. And they take attendance every day, and they follow up. If a kid doesn't come to rehearsal, they immediately text that student to say, we want to make sure you're okay. Because of course in college, kids do have the freedom not to show up, and they will do that if you allow them to. So they do a lot of the administrative stuff. We also have Facebook groups, and I know that may not be allowed at the high school level, but Facebook is the best way to build ownership in your choir. Because the section leaders are always saying, don't forget, this recording's due tonight, and don't forget you need to wear your red t-shirt tomorrow, and they do all that stuff. But they also run more sectionals than anybody else. They're strong musicians, and, we acknowledge that they are among the best or among the best. But then there will be a day where we'll go out into sectionals, and I'll say, okay, the third person on the roster alphabetically tomorrow will be running the sectional. And this is the repertoire to be covered. And you have 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's great.
And I do it randomly, so they don't think, oh, she's just picking the second best person. No, it's
Right.
random.
Yeah, that's great. And I'll say, for anyone listening, if you are in a place where students wouldn't be allowed to do a Facebook group, there are apps like Remind, where they can text each other. I also sometimes just have my section leaders create a text thread group on their phones. It's not as interactive as Facebook, but they can at least send out some of those reminders. But it was a really cute story. Of course, I'm going to tell a story real quick about a current student. I can't say her name, of course, but I missed a rehearsal. So our chamber choir at the high school, this is our top ensemble, rehearses outside of school. And they rehearse on Monday evenings primarily. And my wife's mother passed away a couple of weeks ago. And so I never miss Monday night rehearsals, ever. But of course I missed a Monday night rehearsal because I was in the hospital with my wife and her mom, and being there with family. And I'm also fortunate I have an assistant director at the high school and an accompanist. So there are a couple other adults that are there to facilitate things. Um, and so they helped, and they led the rehearsal and put together a plan in my absence, and the kids were great, and they worked, got some stuff done. But then afterwards, one of my senior girls came up and she was like, Mr. Muntz, have you ever thought about allowing a student to help run one of those rehearsals if you're gone? Because I know that our other teachers are fine too, but they're not in rehearsal with us all the time, and so they don't know the tempos that we've been doing, and so maybe I'd be happy to help. And she was so shy asking, and I was like, wait a minute, no, that's great, yes, of course. I've just never had a kid come up to me and say, "Can I lead a rehearsal?" before. That's great, and I started immediately thinking about the concepts we're discussing now, and I was like, well, maybe that's a signal to me that I should be empowering more kids to do that anyway. That's something that, especially if I've got a high school student who's thinking about maybe music education or something like that. These are opportunities. I've had tons of chances to wave my hands at people. I don't have to wave all the hands. Like, I could give that to somebody else. So I think these are, again, it's a releasing of an ego thing, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
We do something that the kids called car wash, which is so much fun. We got into a terrible predicament. There's an early music orchestra that hires chorale to perform, and we were hired to do Jephthah. And I thought the artistic director was talking about Carissimi Jephthah, which is 4 easy choruses.
Mm-hmm.
And about August 1st, before classes start, one of my students said, Dr. Weber, on their website, it says by Handel. And I thought, what? I didn't even know Handel wrote a piece called Jephthah. And so I looked it up, and it was 14 long choruses. And we were scheduled to perform it like 1st of October. So we were doing some concerts out in the countryside outside of Houston, and I called a church and said, and we had a big hole in the schedule, a whole afternoon off. Do you have 4 Sunday school rooms we could use? I don't need a piano, just 4 Sunday school rooms. I promise we'll leave it in good shape. Sure. And so we got in those 4 Sunday school rooms, and I created 2 quartets in each room. And every 15 minutes, half of the singers would rotate, not everybody, but half. Mm-hmm. And so they would move to another room. So the kids remaining in the room they are the experts on that chorus while the new people came in, and then they would rotate. I don't know if I'm making sense to you, but it was amazing. At the end of a 3-hour spot, we could make our way through all 14 choruses.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And no section leaders. And I told, they said, who's the section leader? I said, you're all section leaders. And I don't want the alphas to take over. Mm-hmm. And they all knew what I meant. There's certain personalities that are just going to take over.
Right.
I said, I want this to be everybody leading.
Right.
So we call it car wash because, when you go through a car wash, first you get vacuumed, then you get rinsed, then you get soaped. So you go through anyway, we do car wash all the time.
That's really cool. One of the things, we're in a hybrid teaching model right now at my school, and one of the only things I like about it, of course, we're that way so we can have more room in the classrooms to distance and stuff. But the only thing I like about it is that it's forcing kids. All my choirs are now half the normal size, so it's forcing the kids that wouldn't otherwise be leaders to just have to figure it out. Like they're being thrown to the wolves and having to be maybe the leader voice in their section where they wouldn't otherwise be. And so what I'm super excited about is we're hoping next semester maybe where they could come back together in all 80 of them in the same place and be a better 80 that they ever would have been, just from being forced to rehearse in smaller little cohorts, that could be a really cool thing, especially for those young singers. What's your philosophy or your practice on testing, part checks, making singers prove that they've learned their music? What do you do there?
Well, we do a lot of things. And I'm talking about normal times because we can't do any of it right now. But normally we test every day. And so we test 10 singers every day. The names are at random. So I very dramatically take a piece of paper and turn it to the front so the students can see who the 10 singers are going to be. And they go out of the room and they test for my teaching assistant who assigns them a grade. If they make lower than B minus, that's considered a fail. And they lose 2 points off their semester grade. And they know they will be tested the next day.
Wow.
We record the test so that if the student feels that he was unfairly graded, I can go back and listen. That has turned our choir around. The students get a month of testing passages ahead of time, so they know what will be tested on October 12th, and there are no surprises. And I select passages that they will be successful on. I test for success, even on the top choir of a pretty good college choir. I don't sock it to them in terms of something that's just ridiculously hard. We kind of work that out ourselves in rehearsal.
So then if your singers are getting a lot of time they know it's going to be tested, and I'm assuming that these are pieces that the ensemble will perform, so it's lending towards the rehearsal, then what's your thought then on the role for their sight reading and their literacy ability if they're not being asked to do that in rehearsal, or how do you work that in?
Well, in our top choir at the university, we don't do any sight singing in that choir.
Okay.
They're almost all music majors. They are taking or have taken sight singing. All of our other choirs do sight singing routinely, but the top choir does not.
And that makes sense, because that's closer to how a professional environment would be, where you're expected to figure out. I don't care how you know the music, you just need to know the music.
Right.
When you get there, yeah.
Though in the spring when we were all kicked out of our buildings, the only thing I could really figure out to do was to try to do skill building.
Uh-huh.
So we did sight reading factory with every choir for days. And interestingly, then, when the kids did their sight singing audition for placement in the fall, the scores were through the roof better.
Yep.
And the kids knew that too. And then this fall, we were all online. And so the only thing I could really have them do was record your part on Flipgrid and post it by this date. And again, their musicianship just grew so much.
Yeah, and just for the record, I did not pay Betsy to talk about how great Sight Reading Factory was. That was.
And I'm looking, I see the little logo there. Listen, I'll plug it. And I'm sure there are other apps that are just as great, but Sight Reading Factory is genius. So
yeah, it's pretty, especially because one of the things I like about it is how wide ranging the difficulty level is. I mean, if you need to challenge one of your grad students, you can challenge one of your grad students. And if you got a kid who's never seen a quarter note before,
right.
You can do that. Yeah, that's definitely a good thing. So that makes sense to me when I ask about how you use it in a rehearsal. If you've got a younger training university choir, they probably are still going to need to have ensemble sight singing work done, because of course I'm sure you're like a lot of universities where your kids come from a varying backgrounds of what they've already learned, and you've got to get them. Get them to a certain place. So, at the beginning, we mentioned that we're going to discuss, we can kind of tie these ideas together here probably, because we decided we were going to discuss ownership and professionalism. Is there a distinction in your mind between those two things, ownership and professionalism? Are they the same? Are they so linked that they basically turn into the same thing in an ensemble? How would you phrase that?
Well, I think professionalism is one of the outcomes of creating ownership in your ensemble.
Okay.
I mean, another outcome is esprit de corps, better sense of community, better sense of accomplishment. But professionalism is one of the outcomes. And I think we want all of our choirs, even that community chorus that really just wants to be together because of their sense of community. We want all of them evolving closer to a sense of professionalism. And I think that the great opportunity for those of us in the field is that choirs are so lame in terms of being professional. And I say that as a lifelong choir nerd who thinks it is the most glorious thing in the world for a group of people to sing together. But when you think about the way we teach music and get music into a place where it can be performed on a stage, it's just so inefficient, and it compares so unfavorably to our colleagues in good bands and orchestras.
Mm.
And I think a big part of that is building this ownership where the singers know I'm the one who has to figure this out. They are not going to play this on the piano for me. So
Yeah, I think there is a it's almost like a law of diminishing returns going on when we are thinking about why that might be true in a vocal setting where it can't be true in an instrumental setting. There's a certain amount of buy-in, and so I'm going to think about this economically, but also psychologically. If you grew up playing an instrument, that means someone in your life made a financial investment in you being able to even have an instrument. There probably was at some point in your background somebody saying, you must do this. I spent $5,000 on this instrument. You will practice, whatever. Singers don't grow up with that in almost any case because our instruments are free. So we might grow up possibly with a little bit of taking for granted ourself as an instrument. And so that's part of it, I think. And then the other part of it could be that we have this idea that because we all have a voice, that we can all sing, and at which point, which we can, but I think that could lead it to us taking for granted the fact that we are musicians on the same caliber. As a instrumentalist, we always get so frustrated as singers when we hear things like musicians and singers, but then we contribute probably to some of that stereotype by not approaching our art form in a professional way. What are some things that you see sometimes that lead you to think that we might need to
well,
catch up?
First of all, it must be said that the skill of sight singing music is more difficult than sight playing music. We don't have buttons to push.
Yep.
And everything is audiated, and I think it's a more difficult skill. So I'll give us that. But things I have sat in on rehearsals of fine professional choirs that every person here has heard of, and watched them at a rehearsal wrestle with pitches and rhythms. That would never happen in an orchestra.
Yeah.
The expectation, even at the highest choral level, is still not that people really come in prepared.
We like to say that it is.
Yes.
And then not enforce it.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's true, and I think that's partly because we, like I said, some of the taking for granted of our instrument. It'll still be there tomorrow. I'll have it next week too, and I had it last week, and it's just always there. And so there's a little bit of I can get to it later, kind of a sense, possibly. But then there's also the fact that our instruments are intensely personal because they're part of us. And so I think it's hard for us to think of ourselves as a violin or a trumpet or whatever, because if it's not exactly, if I'm the conductor and the singer isn't doing the right thing, I have to make a comment directly to the core of that person. And that's how we've been raised to think of it. And I think sometimes we get afraid as directors to be as forthright as maybe we need to be to get that professionalism where it should be. How would you define, or maybe how about this is a better question? If you were to describe a singer, even at the college level that you work with, describe a singer that kind of personifies professionalism, what would that look like?
That would look like a kid who knows the expectation and meets the expectation. Now, my expectation is not fully professional for those kids. The concert chorale is all undergrad singers. Our graduate singers don't sing in ensemble. Plus, we always have 4 graduate conducting majors, but it's an undergraduate ensemble. And what I've been trying to do over the years is just lift the expectation a little bit every year. And I think we have, but we're still not fully at professional level.
Hmm.
But we're closer.
Yeah.
Closer. And another thing we do all the time is we start a passage and we stop immediately. We hear something wrong in measure 4, and instead of getting to the end of the passage and just continuing to go, we stop and fix that. Then we go back to measure 1 and we go. Cornelia Yarbrough at LSU long ago did research on the frequent stops of choral directors and came to the conclusion that it's very demoralizing to singers.
Yeah.
And so we need to just let it go, let them keep going, get to the end of something, and then go back and say, okay, look at measure 4 now. It's just stop, 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 stop.
Yep. And then I would throw into that, ask them. Ask them, was there a section in there that we didn't all agree on pitch, rhythm, tempo, and they'll say measure 4.
Yep.
Measure 4 was the problem. I try to give them as little answers as I possibly can, and this is something I've had to retrain myself over the last several years. Take things that I want to say to them about what they did wrong and phrase it as a question. If I start phrasing it as a question, then that's putting ownership on them. They know they're going to be quizzed. They're going to be quizzed afterwards. How did that go?
Yep.
And they're going to be expected to say, we were late in measure 4. We sang a dotted quarter note instead of whatever it was. And that's, I think that's really important. So let's wrap it up with this then. Why do we care? In other words, why is this something that is so important that we could, at any level of choral music making, benefit not only our experienced singers, but our beginning younger singers, our just coming in the door singers, with putting some of the ownership of things onto them, with giving them an ideal of a certain age appropriate level of professionalism for whatever it is that they're doing. How does this benefit us and our singers, do you think, in the long run?
Well, first of all, it's better teaching.
Yeah.
I mean, no matter who's conducting any kind of ensemble, we are teachers. And it's our job to create independent athletes and readers and mathematicians and singers. It's better teaching. But also, equally fundamentally to you and me, is that the music's better.
Yeah.
The music, when singers truly buy in and they're doing it intelligently, the music making just is lifted to such a higher, better, more wonderful, meaningful standard.
Yep. And that benefits the singers too. And I think sometimes people underestimate that when we have an excellence standard for them, again, age appropriate, whatever that is for the kids you're working with, the singers you're working with, is that we think that feeds our ego, which it does. We like our choirs to sound good.
Sure.
There's nothing wrong with that. But it also, I think we underestimate how much self-esteem that helps our singers build when they are part of a truly great choir.
Yep.
It's not just about elitism and showing off. It's about helping singers within the choir feel like when they hear a recording of that choir that they were a part of, or when the audience applauds, they are able to, on some visceral level in their own self, think, I did that. I helped do that. Yep. And not that I happen to move my mouth and mumble around while some other people did this amazing thing.
Right.
I helped make this. For me, that's what it's all about.
Me too.
Yeah, that's great. Chris,
may I just say something?
Please.
Unrelated to our topic.
I was going to ask you that anyway. So so pause. So I'm going to ask you. So this is going to be my last question anyway. So Betsy, what would you like to tell us about that I haven't given you a chance to talk about yet?
I would like to say that the entire choral profession owes you a huge debt of thanks.
Oh, well, thank you.
In the spring, our professional organizations held a webinar that absolutely decimated the future of choral music.
It kind of did.
And had you not come through, you, Chris Muntz, you are the person who stepped forward and said, wait a minute, let's talk about this a little bit more. And you brought in an epidemiologist, and suddenly it didn't seem so grim. And Chris, I thank you for that.
Well, I really appreciate that, Betsy. That is very nice for you to say that. I think that I've been doing this show now for a year and a half. At that moment in May, when that happened, really for me, when I realized that I had an opportunity to use the platform that I've built here and reach people, that there were people that, based on that, the way we were processing that event at the time, rather than, without rehashing the whole thing, but with rather than responding to that crisis with, okay, and how can we move forward and make it safer, we responded with, we should just not move forward at all. And my stepping in was to say, hey, I think we could actually develop some tools to help make choir come back, but come back safer. And I think that we made our case for sure for that on the show. There was that episode that you're referencing, but then I did quite a few after that. So I tried to build the case and make it scientific as much as possible. But I really appreciate the shout out for that. And I think that if anything else, it got people talking and thinking about some nuance of that situation. Although I did get my fair share of grief for that, but I'm old and don't really care. And one of the reasons, one of the reasons that, well, thank you so much. I've got to sign off. I really appreciate your kind words and your insight here. I think this is going to be really helpful for people. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Betsy. And thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
Okay. All right. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, as always, for sticking around to the end of an episode. I hope you enjoyed that talk as much as I did. She made me blush there a little bit at the end. I did not see that coming, but some awesome moments there and some really important things for us to reflect on, I think, as teachers, is what is really our job? Is our job to be the place the music comes from, or is our job to be the conduit through which the music flows? And it sounds like, as we talked through those things, we're really both, she and I, leaning towards, we are conduits. Our job is to be where the students and the singers' music goes through, and the composer's music goes through. And so I think that's a really neat mentality shift that we can all start to think about. How can we achieve that in our choirs? How can we simply be there for the students and for the singers to help express themselves through the music that we make? So, of course, if you enjoy this show, one of the things at the end I like to do is just remind you of ways that you can help. And when I say help, none of the things that we accomplish on this show could happen without your help. This show is entirely singer supported, which means that there is no corporate sponsorship the way you might think of, meaning none of our sponsors on here pay me a dime unless the listeners decide to go to their websites, use the purchase code, and support those companies. And that's an amazing thing that just allows for us to continue to have this conversation, allows me to choose vendors to associate with that I believe in, which is a really cool thing. And then, of course, also the show is listener supported by a growing group over on Patreon, patreon.com/choralosophy. Is a really important group over there. You can join for as little as $3 a month and jump in and support the show just because you feel like I'm doing good work and you want to help. And or there's also a private podcast feed there that you can get access to find just some of my behind the scenes thoughts that I wouldn't put on the main feed. Also, so it's a kind of a once a month thing. And sometimes I give you updates on the state of the show and things that are going on behind the scenes. And so it's a neat little environment over there that you can join. And of course, if you're new to the show and you're not sure how much you support the show, you can always just share things, comment on things, like things, anytime you interact with Choralosophy content, it helps other people see it. And so that's a very helpful thing. So thank you so much for coming and listening and sticking around all the way to the end. We'll see you next time.